When you get a stack of seed catalogs in the mail and you're starting to look through them, you might be wondering, how am I going to figure out what I actually want to grow in my garden? So today I'm going to tell you how I go through that process. So it's kind of hard for me to believe, but we are at that time of year where I need to be doing some garden planning, and I'm actually kind of behind from where I was last year, so I really need to get started on it. And I thought it would be fun, since I'm going through this process right now, to tell you about my process for figuring out what I want to grow in my garden, because I do take a few different steps, and I'm sure everyone has kind of their own way to do it, but if you're trying to figure it out for yourself, I thought you might like to hear how I do it. So first, let's talk about seed catalogs. This year I got 3 in the mail. So I got the Seed Savers Exchange seed catalog, I got the Baker's Creek seed catalog, and then a new one to me this year that was actually recommended by a viewer is this one. This is the Southern Exposure Seed Exchange catalog, and so they are a catalog and a seed seller that works with a lot of things that are actually best suited for the area that I live in. So I'm excited to go through that one because it is new to me and to see what kind of things they have in there. So that's what I'm going to be looking through as far as seed catalogs go this year. But when I get started, before I even really get into the catalogs, the first thing I do is take stock of the previous year. So if this is not your first year gardening, the first thing I think is a good thing to do is just look at what you grew last year and how did things go. And this is actually a process that I kind of start at the end of the growing season. So usually once we're starting to wrap things up in the garden, I'll ask Jason, you know, what kind of things did you like? What did you think did really well? And we just kind of have a conversation about which varieties we really enjoyed, which ones were kind of a flop or didn't go so well, and whether maybe we want to try those again. It's really informal. It's not like I'm taking notes or anything, but it's just kind of the beginning of that conversation of starting to think about what we like and what we might want to grow again and what we might want to skip on in future years. Because there are varieties that I want to grow every single year, or Jason wants to grow every single year. Most of the time we agree on what those are. But you know, those things that are just so delicious or grow so well or are so beautiful to look at, usually a combination of those 3 things really, the things that we just have to have, and without a doubt we want to grow year after year because they're just our absolute favorites. So once I've kind of got that stuff in mind, then I start going through the seed catalogs, and the way I do it is first I just go in and mark anything that looks good. It's kind of like a no limits process. I will go through one of these catalogs and just go page by page, look at everything, and then I will mark with my pen and with a little sticky like post-note flag in the page, okay, there's stuff on here that I like, and I just fill it up, and it's no restraint whatsoever. And I like doing that because I think if you go in trying to be like, you know, finding your final picks from the beginning, it can kind of put a lot of pressure on the process, and you might not make the same decisions that you would make if you just open yourself up and just imagine all of the possibilities. So that's my first step. Then after I've done the whole just flag anything that kind of looks good process, I go through the catalogs again. And so then this time I'm being a little bit more thoughtful and really starting to think about what is going to work well in our garden. So I'm looking at, you know, what areas do things grow best in? I mean, when I do that first pass, I'm not just like flagging tropical things because that looks fun because I know that's not going to grow in my area. But on the second pass, I'm looking at, okay, this thing, maybe it could grow in my area, but is it really best suited for that versus this variety that is supposed to be exactly right for my conditions, that kind of thing. I also start to look at different flavor profiles and the colors and shapes and sizes and all that kind of stuff, and also start to consider how I might use whatever item I'm looking at. So when I'm looking at tomatoes, is this a canning tomato versus a paste or sauce tomato versus a drying tomato versus a great fresh eating tomato? I start to look at those details. And what I like to do to mark those items that I really like and that I think would work well in our garden is just mark them with a big star. So then it's really obvious to me as I'm flipping through which items are in that kind of final list. And from there, I move on to my final cut. So this is when things get a little bit brutal. I start having to really maybe get rid of things that sounded interesting and might really be fun to grow, but just aren't going to be in that final group for whatever reason. So at this stage, I'm really pulling back and looking at the big picture, looking at, say, the tomatoes that we want to grow and seeing what does the lineup look like? Are we getting that variety? What kind of mixture of plants is going to give us a variety of sizes, a variety of colors, a variety of flavor profiles? Because I don't want a garden that's just all red tomatoes or all cherry tomatoes or all big orange tomatoes or anything like that. I want all of the different colors and different sizes and different flavors in there. And I like to keep the variety in mind for a couple different reasons. The first is just culinary. You know, when I'm cooking with my garden produce, I want the variety of the colors just to get really beautiful food. I want variety in sizes. Going back to tomatoes, I want slicing tomatoes that are going to be great to put on a sandwich. I want little teeny cherry tomatoes that are great for snacks and just kind of popping and eating as you go. And I want ones that are kind of in the middle too, just maybe for cutting up, putting in different recipes or whatever that are a little more versatile. You might want ones for canning versus ones for drying and all those things that I mentioned earlier, just because it's going to mean that you have a better experience with your garden and are able to get the different things out of it that you want. It's also good to think about because when you're looking at your garden and actually thinking about production and what you're able to get out of it, having that variety in there is going to give you a better chance at really having a good experience and having some success. Because, you know, with a garden, I never expect things to work 100% across the board all the time and for everything to be like super crazy, great production, because that's just not how it works. Sometimes, you know, one spot in the garden isn't as good as another, or maybe the weather this year isn't great for one variety, but another variety really thrives in those conditions. So if you plant just all one type of tomato, if it's a bad year for that type, then you're not going to get much. But if you have different options in there, then maybe one doesn't do so well, but another one really does do well. So you're still getting something out of the garden, even if it's not a great year for one type of whatever you're planting. Side note, that's also something to keep in mind when you're thinking about the previous year and what things worked well if you do have, you know, some experience to go on. Because, you know, I grew some varieties last year that didn't do great, but I'm not going to take them off the list forever, never grow those again, because it was only one year. Maybe last year just wasn't their year. Maybe the conditions weren't right for them, so I'll still keep them in the running and in my consideration and give them another chance or two before I decide that they're just not a variety that's going to work for me. Something else I do when I'm doing this final selection process is I talk to Jason about it, because the garden is really kind of my project. I mean, I do the majority of the planning and, you know, trying to figure out what varieties we want to grow. It's really more my interest, but Jason is definitely involved. He helps out a lot. There's no way that I could get the garden to do what it does if it wasn't for him and his help. And he also enjoys the stuff we get out of it. He cares about what we're growing. So I also bring him in at this point and ask him, you know, I've kind of picked out these things that look good, but, you know, you take a look. Is there anything that you think I missed? Or is there anything in these varieties that really stands out to you? Like, oh yeah, I really think we should try that one. I definitely get his input because it matters to him too, and he cares about what we grow. So, you know, bring in other people into the loop. If you are maybe the head person in your home taking charge of this, it's a good idea to consider the other people and the stuff that they like and make sure that they're in the loop and have a time to voice what they want and just to hear their perspective and have them maybe flip through the catalog if they're willing to do that, because, you know, they might see something that you missed. I also think this is a great time to bring kids into the process if you have kids. Of course, they can come in at any stage depending on how interested they are personally, but at least at this point, you know, talk to them about what they want to grow. Maybe they can pick out a variety that they really want to try, and it's fun because it's something that's more personal to them. It's something that they selected and they can kind of be in charge of it, checking on it, make sure it's doing well and taking care of it and harvesting it and all that sort of thing. And they might pick out something that maybe you wouldn't pick, that maybe doesn't suit your preferences, but something that they think looks really fun or really interesting or that they would really like to experiment with. And then once I've made that final cut, you know, maybe I've had to remove some things for the list that were really good contenders, but they didn't quite make it, or maybe I had to make a hard decision between two different types of peppers. You know, they're kind of the same color, they're both very similar, similar. Which one are we gonna go with this year? Once I've done all that stuff, then I look at the seeds that I have before I order. And this is something really important to remember. If you do have other seeds, make sure that you look and see what you still have, because you might have your final list. These are all the things we want to grow, but you need to check and see, if it's something from a previous year, do we need to order more of those seeds, or do we have a lot? Or maybe I thought we had some, but we really don't, and we need to make sure that that gets into the cart. You don't want to forget about your seed stockpile and the things that you have or maybe don't have that you want to include in this year's garden. And I like to do a spreadsheet for this. It's just an easy way for me to keep track of everything and know what's going on. I divide it up by type of plant, so tomatoes, peppers, lettuces, melons, all that kind of thing, and then I'll put each variety in there and put when I bought the seeds and about how many are left in the package, so that I know, and it's really easy to see what's going on. And I'll make sure that's up to date, have everything checked off that I need to buy or don't need to buy from previous year's gardens, and then I go ahead and place my order. And this is a process that's really worked well for me. It can seem a little intense, especially when I start going through and just kind of start flagging basically everything in the seed catalog. And sometimes I do have to make some tough decisions, and I think Jason thinks it's a little funny, me like hemming and hawing over tomato varieties or pepper varieties. But the result is that I have a garden where I'm growing a lot of varieties that I already know work well, or ones that I'm really, really excited to try and to see how they do for me. Because, with the garden, another tip for success is just growing stuff that you like. So if you can go through this process and really consider what's going to be fun for you, which varieties you enjoy, and all of that, then that's just going to help make sure that you're more likely to get out there, do the work that you need to do to keep your garden healthy, and that you're actually harvesting those things when they become ripe. And let me know in the comments, are you doing some garden planning right now? Have you been looking through your seed catalogs? What types of things are standing out to you? Or maybe if you have a different process for selecting seeds, I'd love to hear about that. And if you happen to be new here and you want more healthy eating tips and nutrition info and videos like this one, then make sure that you subscribe, because eating healthy and living a healthy lifestyle really doesn't have to be complicated, and I want to show you how to do it. And if you want to watch some more videos, I have a couple linked over here that you might like. Thanks for watching. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.